Revealed. How a millionaire's unexpected act transformed a struggling mechanic's life forever. Jake wiped the grease from his hands, a familiar tension settling into the pit of his stomach. The world outside the garage windows buzzed with day-to-day life, while within these four walls, his world felt like it was closing in. He thought of his father, the man who had built this place brick by brick, instilling a sense of pride that now teetered on the brink of collapse. Dwindling customers and mounting competition strained the once thriving family business. He couldn't shake the nagging fear that his dreams for Cody were slipping from his grasp. Every day, Jake battled a silent fear. What if he lost the garage? What would he leave for his son who longed for a life outside this small town? With only light coming from the overhead fluorescents flickering like his resolve, Jake's mind raced. Every bill that came, every customer that chose the shiny new dealership down the road over him, felt like a stab at his pride. Sweat trickled behind his neck as he thought of those long nights, the toll it took on his family and health. He couldn't help but confront an unsettling truth. Was he stuck in a downward spiral, dragging his son with him? Meanwhile, he had urged Cody to dream big, to chase horizons far beyond these cracked asphalt streets. It felt hypocritical. A father pushing his boy towards possibilities Jake was losing sight of himself. As he flashed the lights on the waiting customer's vehicle, a luxury SUV rolled into view. Definitely not a place where he expected to see a familiar face. The driver, Victor, a well-known millionaire in town, stepped out, his air of arrogance souring the crisp afternoon. Jake clenched his fists. Someone like Victor wouldn't understand the intricacies of hard work. They pulled into different worlds, right? Nevertheless, the truck sputtered before wheezing to a halt. Jake sighed, his moral dilemma surfacing. Should he even help? The man represented everything Jake resented, wealth unearned through sweat. But beneath that arrogant facade lay a man, in need. Maybe if he could just fix his vehicle and send him on his way, it would stave off the hopelessness settling in his heart. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Determined, Jake approached Victor, who slumped against the SUV. The genuine conversation that followed caught Jake off guard. He found himself detailing the struggles, his voice firm but restless. Victor listened, an unexpected flicker of intrigue crossing his face. Jake felt raw, as if this polished man could touch his deepest fears, unraveling a bond woven from hard work, family, and the looming fear of passing on failure. But just as a semblance of hope began to blossom, Victor revealed he'd heard whispers of local zoning laws threatening to close the garage. The world felt heavy, and Jake's heart sank deeper. This conflict, should he accept help or cling stubbornly to his pride, swirled within him. The very essence of who he was, as a father and a man, teetered on this brink. Would he allow Victor in, risking vulnerability? Or would he let pride destroy what remained? As the weight of impending loss was about to suffocate him, a shadow moved toward the entrance of the garage, interrupting their conversation. Jake froze, heart thudding, knowing life could change in an instant. He turned, dreading what truth awaited him, the air thick with uncertainty. Would this unexpected visitor seal his fate or open doors he never anticipated? Jake's pulse quickened as he turned to face the figure stepping into the dimly lit garage. The familiar silhouette against the fading light felt like a jolt to his heart. It was Sandra, the town's councilwoman, her expression serious and determined. She had always been an ally in the community, but her presence here now sent a sharp pang of anxiety through him. Could she add more pressure, or perhaps offer a lifeline? "Jake," she called out, her voice steady but grave. "We need to talk about the upcoming zoning changes." Her words hung in the air, amplifying the tension that charged the atmosphere. He exchanged a quick glance with Victor, who leaned against his SUV, a smirk blossoming on his face, perhaps reveling in the tension at Jake's expense. The sight was like salt in a fresh wound. "Is it as bad as they say?" Jake asked, his voice barely above a whisper. He felt his heart heavy, dreading the answer. Sandra took a breath, her brows knitting together in concern. "It could be. If the new regulations pass, your garage could run into serious trouble. I came to discuss potential alternatives, but there are few options if the community doesn't rally behind you." "Rally behind me?" Jake shot back, frustration bubbling over. "You think that'll help against developers with deep pockets? We both know how this town works. It's always about what they want, never what the little guys need." Deep down, Jake felt a flicker of anger ignite. Did he want to turn away from the fight, or was it time to stand firm against fate? Collective frustration coiled within him, but he was also aware that he could push past the bitterness of powerlessness. Here, in front of him, stood two very different paths: receive help or face ridicule, both of which threatened his pride. Victor shifted, arms crossed, an amused spectator in this unfolding drama. "Looks like you could use a backer," he interjected, sarcasm dripping from his tone. "I can help with that, but the question is, what's it worth to you?" The air thickened with tension as Jake grappled with the implications of the offer. Accepting help from someone like Victor felt like surrendering to everything he despised. Was a lifeline worth tying himself to someone who represented everything he fought against? "I'm not selling out," Jake shot back, his voice rising. "Calm down, Jake," Sandra interjected, raising her hand. "We're not discussing selling out. We're discussing survival. Your pride won't keep this garage open." Her words struck hard against his pride. Was he really willing to let the weight of ego crush everything he cherished? The realization hit him fiercely. The dignity he clung to might not be the same as what he was teaching Cody about resilience. "Look," Sandra continued, her tone turning softer. "If you put aside your disdain for the likes of Victor, you might discover that there's power in collaboration, not just competition. You need to fight, not just for yourself, but for your son, who may one day walk through these doors." With every word, Jake felt the walls of his mind begin to crack. Perhaps Victor wasn't just a shallow reflection of the greed and arrogance he despised, but a potential partner in forging a path of survival. The room felt heavy with deliberation, the burden of pride and practicality colliding in his mind. Could he find common ground with the man he had instinctively judged? As Jake considered the precarious balance of his decisions, the gravity of his situation cemented his resolve. He could either confront his pride and risk the vulnerabilities it entailed, or cling to resentment, ultimately watching everything fade away. A brewing storm inside shifted, and the possibility of accepting help loomed dauntingly. Before he could make a decision, a sudden sharp clang echoed through the garage, a rock thrown through the window shattering the moment of introspection. Jake's heart raced, a reminder that time was running out. He turned, fury igniting like wildfire within him. Who was responsible for this act of aggression? What further dangers awaited as he wrestled with truth and decision? In that instant, the battle for his legacy changed. A storm was brewing, and Jake stood right at the edge, caught between two worlds. But could unyielding pride stop him from acting? Determined to find the answers, he knew one thing: this was just the beginning. Jake clenched his fists, his fury overriding the fear that the rock brought with it. Who would dare threaten him in his own sanctuary? The garage, once a haven filled with the comforting scents of oil and grease, now felt like a battlefield. He scanned the shadows, instincts on high alert, every muscle ready to spring into action. "Who did that?" he demanded, glaring at Victor and Sandra. They exchanged brief looks, but neither had answers. Victor shrugged, nonchalant, leaning back against the vehicle as if they weren't in the midst of turmoil. "Let's focus on the bigger picture, Jake," Sandra urged, her voice charged with urgency. "The zoning changes won't just eliminate your livelihood, they'll affect everything you've built here." Her words cut through his anger, fueling the dawning realization that he had precious little time. He was fighting not just for a garage, but for the legacy he wanted to leave for Cody. The values of hard work, determination, and standing for what was right. He could almost hear Cody's tentative footsteps approaching the garage, a sound that warmed his heart and wrapped his mind in clarity. His jaw tightened. What do we do? Sandra stepped closer, her presence both reassuring and disconcerting. "We start by rallying people behind you, but that takes you being on board with the right allies. Look, Victor may not be the best choice on paper, but his connections could be what you need." The thought twisted in Jake's gut. But he knew he had to confront his personal idealism if he was going to move forward. Every instinct screamed at him to reject Victor's involvement, yet he could feel the stakes rising higher. The other option, disregarding help altogether, might lead to his downfall, an unfolding crumple of everything he had worked for. "What's your plan, Victor?" Jake challenged, turning his focus on the man whose very being he loathed to engage. Victor straightened, the smirk fading from his lips as he sensed the gravity of the conversation. "You want to take the fight to developers? I can facilitate meetings, leverage connections to make sure your voice is heard," Victor offered, his tone shifting from jest to something more serious. "But it'll take more than just talking, Jake. You have to bring people to your side. You need to show them why this garage matters." The weight of his words landed in Jake's chest, thick as lead. Could he truly muster the courage to speak out? The thought of standing in front of strangers, laying bare his passion, terrified him. Still, if it meant securing his son's future, perhaps this was a risk worth taking. Doubt rippled through him as he considered the route ahead. "And what do you want from me?" "Just the satisfaction of a job well done," Victor replied, a flash of sincerity lighting his features. "If this goes through, I'll have gained something substantial, and I'll do it without any strings attached. But you'll have to earn the community's trust, Jake. That's all on you." For the first time, Jake caught something genuine in Victor's gaze, challenge mingling with a hint of hope. Realizing that alliances were complex, he felt the churning in his gut transform into a sense of resolve. Trust could be earned, but sacrifice needed to come first. "All right," Jake said, swallowing his pride. "Let's do it." As he stepped forward, a new spark ignited within him. The battle lines were drawn, and despite misgivings about his new ally, a plan began to take shape in his mind. This couldn't only be about survival. It would also be about reclaiming his narrative. The next day, he would start talking to people, reaching out, explaining why the garage meant more than just metal and oil. He would reach for the voices that still echoed from these walls, the voices of dreams that had been muffled, but never silenced. But first, he needed to confront the shadow of fear clouding his heart, the thought of failure, of voices in the crowd echoing doubt rather than support. What would he say to a community that barely knew him? Jake paused, the enormity of his decision dawning on him. The tension was palpable, and the real battle was just beginning. With a newfound determination, he turned to Sandra and Victor. "Let's light this flame. It's time they knew who I really am." As they began sketching out the plan, anticipation mixed with dread swirled in Jake's chest. The path ahead was fraught with risks, and just when he thought he could push forward, another thought seeped into his mind. What if he lost not just the garage, but the respect of his peers for extending a hand, a partnership with Victor he'd always scorned? With a shiver running down his spine, he realized he was stepping onto a roller coaster, with highs and lows yet to come. Unknowingly, he was on the cusp of not just a fight for survival, but a profound transformation of self. What if he discovered strengths and connections within him he never knew existed? That question lingered in the tension-filled air, echoing like a bell ringing ominously, urging him forward. The dawn light streamed into the garage, casting long shadows that felt strangely ominous as Jake prepared for the day ahead. The air was thick with a mix of oil and impending change, and he could sense that his life was about to shift in ways he hadn't anticipated. Today wasn't just about defending the garage. It was about stepping into a new version of himself, a man willing to speak, to connect, to fight. Focus, Jake. You've got to prepare your message. He paced the floor, mimicking the rhythm of an engine revving up to speed. Each step echoed with the weight of his thoughts. He couldn't just walk in with anger. He had to articulate his passion, define his vision, and present a compelling case for why the garage mattered. He recalled the outpouring of memories, the laughter shared with Cody, the long nights spent fixing broken parts, the pride woven into every job completed. But would others see it that way? He grabbed a notepad, fingers trembling slightly as he jotted down key points he wanted to address. Community, legacy, hard work. Each word felt strangely insufficient. How long could he cling to the want for approval, the need for validation from others? No time for doubt, he muttered, shaking away the negative thoughts. He needed to confront the demons within himself, the fear of being judged, the fear that no one would care about a garage in a world consumed by glitzy developments. As he wrote, he felt the corners of his mind beginning to clear. Realization dawned. This wasn't merely about his garage. It was about empowering himself and taking control of his narrative. Wasn't that what he critiqued in others? Those who went through life merely accepting their circumstances rather than challenging them. If he was to ask the community for support, it would require vulnerability, honesty, and sincerity. Taking a deep breath, Jake slumped against the workbench, staring at the array of tools, each one a symbol of what he could create and fix. This was his domain, a place where he held skills that mattered. He had the capability to repair broken things. But what about fixing his own life? Wouldn't that take just as much courage? The garage door creaked open, interrupting his thoughts. Cody peeked inside, his innocent smile illuminating the dim light. Jake's heart softened. "Hey, buddy," he called out, managing a brighter tone. "Can I help?" Cody's voice was laced with eagerness, a reflection of the very passion Jake felt. Jake rubbed the back of his neck, wrestling with the urge to shield his son from the looming chaos ahead. Instead, he knelt beside Cody. "You know, today I'm going to talk to some people about the garage. It means a lot to us, doesn't it?" Cody nodded, his eyes wide with curiosity. "Are you scared, Dad?" For a moment, Jake hesitated. Should he confess his uncertainty to a child who looked up to him? But perhaps honesty was the best lesson. "Yeah, I am, kiddo. But sometimes you have to face your fears to stand up for what you believe in." Cody scrunched his face, contemplating the words. "You always tell me to be brave," he offered thoughtfully. Jake smiled, pride swelling in his chest. "That's right. And today, I'm being brave for both of us." Their eyes locked, a silent agreement forged between them. "I need to show them how much this place matters, how much our dreams matter." "Can I come with you?" Cody asked, excitement flickering in his eyes. Jake ruffled his hair, the warmth of his son's trust infusing him with renewed energy. "Not this time, but you can help me prepare. Let's practice what I'm going to say." As they stepped into the rhythm of rehearsal, Jake allowed himself to feel a tinge of hope. Each word spoken aloud transformed his fears into stepping stones, the adrenaline lifting him beyond his doubts. "Just remember, Dad," Cody quipped mid-practice, "they can't ignore your dreams if they hear you loud enough." Jake chuckled, the weight beginning to lift. The fire within him started to crackle with heat. Even the thought of Victor was becoming less daunting. Perhaps collaboration didn't have to mean compromise. Maybe, just maybe, there was strength in shared struggles. Emboldened, he concluded their practice with a sense of purpose. This was his journey, and as he prepared to take that first step, he understood that transformation began with embracing his fears. The community needed to know him, not just a mechanic, but a man willing to fight for what mattered. But lurking just beyond the threshold of his newfound determination was a nagging thought. Could he execute this plan without losing himself in the process? Or would the temptation of their validation alter his core? As the nagging uncertainty settled in his gut, he could only hope that the journey ahead would unveil not just the garage's worth, but also the man he had always been meant to be. Time to ignite the fuse. Today was the beginning. But what explosion awaited when he confronted the developers? Jake's path to the meeting loomed ahead like a winding road full of sharp turns and steep hills. He slipped into the battered old truck he had cherished for years, its faded paint reflecting the grit of his life. As he turned the key in the ignition, a familiar roar erupted, grounding him further in this moment of transition. This was not just any drive. It was the drive that might redefine what it meant to be him. As he navigated through the streets, his mind raced with a mixture of expectation and anxiety. Today, he would present not only the garage, but a piece of himself. What if they laugh? He asked himself, a swell of doubt attempting to claw its way back in. He clenched the steering wheel tighter, reminding himself that vulnerability was not weakness. It was strength. The cityscape shifted from cobblestone roads to polished bricks, the contrast palpable. With each passing block, he felt the weight of expectation settle heavily on his shoulders. He was fueled not by anger anymore, but by hope. A hope that had sparked when Cody reminded him of the importance of being heard. When Jake arrived at the conference center, he hesitated at the entrance. Walls painted a bright, sterile white felt like they were closing in. Was this the place where his dreams would either ignite or extinguish? A long hallway stretched ahead, lined with doors that concealed a future he couldn't fully envision. Swallowing his anxiety, he stepped inside the primary meeting room, a large space filled with unfamiliar faces. The developers were already seated at a long table, their expressions a mixture of boredom and interest, flickering like light and shadow. Recognizing Victor among them made Jake's heart race, his gut twisted with a blend of resentment and admiration. Victor had always felt larger than life, a man who could scoff at the struggles of others without a hint of understanding. Taking a deep breath, Jake summoned every ounce of courage to stand before the group, the weight of their gazes heavy upon him. "Thank you for giving me a chance to present today," he began, his voice steadier than he felt. He faced his audience head-on, anchoring himself in the truth that this moment was for the garage, a space filled with the dreams and sweat of countless hours. A rush of adrenaline surged as he spoke about the legacy of the garage, weaving in stories of memories, resilience, and hope. With every carefully chosen word, he could feel layers of his self-doubt peeling away. Recalling the laughter shared with Cody, the camaraderie with neighbors, and the joy of restoring broken machines fueled his passion. As he spoke, he noticed the expressions on Victor's face shifting from mild curiosity to slight intrigue. Maybe, just maybe, the way forward was not only through logic and profit, but also through the stories that bind communities together. Jake pressed on, feeling a quiet thrill of connection beginning to spark. "I'm not asking for handouts," Jake concluded, locking eyes with Victor. "I'm asking you to see the garage as more than just a property at stake. It's an extension of our lives, a beacon for many who are struggling. It's a place where dreams come alive, and if you could see that, maybe we could find a way to work together." The silence in the room lingered for a moment too long, heavy with unspoken thoughts. Jake held his breath, scanning the faces before him. Had he succeeded in breaking past the facades they wore? Or had he simply laid bare the unpolished truth that they resented? Finally, Victor leaned back in his chair with a contemplative expression, fingers steepled beneath his chin. "Interesting perspective you have, Jake," he said, his voice measured. "But what do you really want?" That single question rang through Jake like a clarion call, sending tremors of uncertainty through his carefully constructed resolve. What did he really want? Recognition? Validation? Or was it something deeper? A desire not just to save the garage, but to validate his own journey and purpose in this world. As the room waited for his answer, Jake felt the duality of his existence pressing upon him. Man versus mechanic, dreamer versus realist. He could either solidify his newfound courage with clarity, or let it slip through his fingers, leaving only shadows behind. In that charged moment, Jake realized everything hinged on how he would navigate this intersection of hope and betrayal. Would he embrace his truth, risking everything for authenticity, or pivot back into the comfort of silence? The question danced in the air, and with it hung a profound revelation. The time had come to face the truth he had been avoiding, the battle within himself that was just beginning. Jake felt a rush of heat flood his cheeks as the question lingered in the air, an invisible weight bearing down. What did he want? The garage meant more than bricks and tools. It embodied his journey, every scrape, every dream that felt just out of reach. A part of him wanted recognition, to be seen as more than just another mechanic lost in the noise of a busy city. Yet another part of him grappled with self-doubt, wondering if his aspirations were mere fantasies, not worthy of pursuit. He cleared his throat, his voice steadying as he searched for the right words. What I want is to create something lasting. Something that doesn't just reflect my efforts but uplifts others. The garage can be a resource, a sanctuary for those who feel beaten down by life. Victor's eyebrow arched slightly, a flicker of curiosity igniting the shadows of skepticism. But how does that translate into a viable business model? He prodded, a challenge wrapped in professionalism. Against this backdrop of skepticism, Jake reared back at the familiar pang of frustration that Victor's tone evoked. Still, he held on to his resolve. This wasn't just about numbers for him. It's not merely about profit margins, he countered, feeling a newfound strength bubbling within. It's about the impact we have. A business can thrive while also nurturing the community around it. Isn't that sustainable success? With each word, previously suppressed feelings swelled to the surface. Maybe Victor represented a toxic past, a voice that long defined his relationship with ambition, a voice he could finally choose to silence. The developers stared at him now, a mixture of anticipation and skepticism etched on their faces. Jake realized he wasn't just fighting for the garage. He was creating space for his own narrative, a truth he had distanced himself from for far too long. He was not merely defending a property. He was defending his path, his identity. In that reflection, his heart raced. This wasn't a mere proposal. This was a revelation about himself. Over the years, he had learned to fix machines, but had neglected the most complex machine of all, himself. Look, I'm not here to pretend that I have it all figured out, Jake continued, leaning in closer, measuring his words carefully. But I do know one thing. People need places to connect and grow. I want this garage to serve as a bridge for those who feel broken. If we can harness the skills of the neighborhood, maybe we can give not only jobs, but also hope. Victor shifted in his seat, a subtle inclination that suggested what he heard was shifting perspectives within him too. Yet Jake wasn't naive enough to believe the battle was won. This was merely the first skirmish in a much bigger fight. As the back and forth continued, Jake felt the fire of passion twist through his words, unlocking a door to moments he once deemed impossible. He was beginning to navigate this complex ecosystem of despair and aspiration. But would they truly see the vision he painted? Or would they still cling to their corporate norms? The turn in the conversation led to a moment of recognition. He had something to offer, something embedded in his identity that transcended the conventional business model. The quiet struggle to accept his worth transformed into a moment of clarity. He was more than what others believed. But just as triumph flickered on the horizon, the specter of doubt nudged at him again. Was he up to the challenge? Could he phase out the shadows of his past to embrace the light of possibility? The stakes felt higher than ever. As he finished the presentation, a creeping realization filled the room. This was just the beginning. While Victor mulled over his words, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that the real test of his growth awaited him. What if Victor challenged him not only on the proposal, but on every deeply held belief that had shaped him for years? The possibility was daunting and exhilarating all at once, urging him to confront not only the doubts of others, but the doubts within himself. The room swirled with tension, each person's gaze painting a portrait of possibility and skepticism. Jake held his breath, knowing that whatever came next would either solidify his newfound identity or threaten to unravel everything he'd fought for. As Victor's gaze locked onto his, a resolution began to take form within Jake, not merely about the garage, but about the life he envisioned. Could he articulate his vision clearly enough to dismantle their skepticism? The real question echoed back. Would he finally embrace the power of his truth? With the silence hanging thick, Jake braced himself for a response, fully aware that the intersection of his past and the flickering hope of his future loomed just beyond the edge of this conversation. The moment of truth was finally at hand. The weight of Victor's gaze intensified, prompting a swell of anxiety within Jake. He steadied himself, ready to receive whatever verdict lay ahead. The moment felt fragile, poised precariously between validation and rejection. He had opened his heart, letting the air of his aspirations fill the room, yet he couldn't ignore the twinge of doubt whispering in the back of his mind. "Jake," Victor started, his voice surprisingly low, "you've proposed a vision that resonates." The unexpected praise sent a flicker of warmth through Jake, yet he remained alert, knowing this could shift at any moment. "But do you truly believe a mechanic's garage can transform lives in the way you described? Aren't you setting yourself up for failure?" The question hung in the air like a heavy shroud, drawing every ounce of confidence from his body. All those years spent honing his craft and battling the demons of self-doubt came crashing back like a storm surge. What if he's right? A part of him screamed, the part that had beaten him down for years. His mind raced, cycling through the faces of the people in his neighborhood. The single mothers, the struggling families, the hopeful kids who wandered through the garage doors wanting to learn. "It's more than just a garage," Jake said, forcing the words out despite the tightening knot in his throat. "It's about potential. It's about turning grease-stained hands into skilled artisans. I've seen what the right guidance can do. It can pull someone from the brink." He felt raw, yet palpable. Each word generated an electric charge in the air. Victor nodded slowly, almost thoughtfully, and that flicker of skepticism in his eyes began to wane. "Consider the practicality, though. How do you envision this working? You mentioned harnessing skills." Jake ruminated on Victor's question, recognizing that addressing his skepticism was essential not only for the proposal, but also for his own validation. "Workshops, community events, mentorship programs. We can teach not just mechanics, but also life skills," he proposed. "It can become a safe space, a place where dreams aren't just fixated on survival, but on thriving." As the words spilled from his mouth, an unexpected clarity dawned on him. Each sentence he crafted seemed to unshackle another layer of self-doubt. He began to speak with a newfound authority, his vision solidifying in his mind. Directing his gaze toward Victor, Jake said firmly, "I will put in the work. I refuse to give up on this vision, not only for myself, but for everyone who needs it." A residual silence enveloped the room, his assertiveness leaving an indelible mark. Jake could feel the shift. However slight, it was palpable, charged with the weight of unspoken possibilities. Victor leaned back in his chair, his expression shifting from incredulity to contemplation. "All right, I'm willing to consider this," he said diffidently. "But you'll need to show results. No more lofty ideas. You will need real, actionable plans." Jake felt a breath he didn't realize he was holding escape. This was his first major win, not just in defense of the garage, but of himself. Still, excitement mingled with anxiety as Victor continued. "To gauge your potential, I need you to present an action plan outlining what these workshops and mentorships would entail within a week." "I can do that," Jake replied, unable to mask the determination weaving its way into his voice, but a small tremor of fear wrinkled his confidence. Could he develop a structure worthy of his vision? The urgency of the deadline loomed large. As the meeting wrapped up, Jake stepped back into the world, adrenaline coursing through him. Every step through the door reshaped the contours of his aspirations. He was ready to execute his plan, but the weight of the task forced him to confront his lingering fears. This was more than just a proposal. It was an expedition into accountability, self-discovery, and perseverance. But as he walked away, a nagging apprehension blossomed within him. How would he consolidate his insights into coherent action? Would he find the unwavering dedication among distractions and creeping self-doubt? Or would the familiar shadows threaten to reclaim his narrative? Jake paused at the street corner, feeling a cacophony of doubt temper his excitement. The moment was crucial, for in defining his path forward, he risked exposing the raw edges of his identity, threatening to unravel everything he'd fought to build. The urgency in his chest urged him to act, yet deep within, uncertainty simmered, begging for a resolution. What if he faltered yet again when it truly counted? Determined to face the crossroads of action and doubt, Jake took a deep breath, readying himself for what came next. How would he harness this momentum in the chaotic terrain of his own insecurities? The answer awaited just around the corner, shrouded in the fog of his own making. Standing at the street corner, Jake felt his phone buzz in his pocket, a reminder that time was slipping through his fingers. He pulled it out to find a message from his old mentor, Luca, prodding him to catch up. In an ordinary moment, he might have ignored the request, feeling the weight of his responsibilities pulling him in 1,000 directions. But now, with the adrenaline surge from his meeting with Victor still fresh, he saw a flicker of opportunity. Jake tapped out a quick reply, suggesting they meet at a local diner. Reconnecting with Luca could offer invaluable insight. This was a man who had once guided him through the tangled wires of life and work. As he made his way to the diner, the streets felt different under his feet. Each step was fueled by a mix of nervous anticipation and purposeful determination. In the fading light, he envisioned the garage transformed into a vibrant hub of learning. He could picture the summoning of raw potential within young hands, eager to grasp turn wrenches instead of succumbing to despair. Jake had hardly taken a seat across from Luca when the older man's keen eyes perceived the dissonance in his demeanor. "What's on your mind, kid?" he asked, his voice a gravelly blend of concern and curiosity. "I have an idea," Jake began, the words bubbling to the surface with surprising clarity. "But I need help turning it into something real. I proposed a program at the garage, workshops for kids to learn mechanics, life skills, mentorship. But now I've got to outline an action plan, and I'm not sure where to even start." Luca leaned back, his brow furrowing into a thoughtful expression. "All right, let's break it down. You need objectives, resources, a timeline. What are you hoping to achieve in the next month? Year? What's your end game?" As they spoke, Jake could feel the shapes of his plan emerging like waves crashing ashore. He began sharing his vision with newfound fervor, and Luca listened intently, making notes and occasionally interjecting with questions that struck at the heart of Jake's insecurities. How will you measure success? What if things go wrong? For each question, Jake felt a pang of resistance followed by the quickening of his spirit. With every challenge Luca posed, Jake found himself wrestling with deeper layers of doubt nestled within, but there was something liberating about confronting those doubts head-on. He recognized the old shroud of fear beginning to lift, revealing a mosaic of potential solutions woven together by determination. By the time their conversation began to wind down, Jake felt invigorated and exhausted simultaneously. He had mapped out key components of his plan, identifying initial workshop topics, potential sponsors, and a timeline to tackle it all. More importantly, he had acknowledged the gravity of what he was committing to. "I can't fail this," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "Then you won't," Luca replied, his voice steady and assuring. "But remember, dealing with challenges means flexibility. You may need to reevaluate your approach as you go. Stay grounded, but don't be afraid to adjust your goals if the situation demands it." Jake nodded, feeling a sting of clarity as the weight of those words settled deep. In the end, success wouldn't be dictated by rigid paths, but by his ability to adapt, a realization that sparked a new resolve within him. As they parted ways, Jake replayed the conversation in his mind, piecing together the fragments of his plan. The path was beginning to take shape, yet a feeling of discomfort coiled around his stomach. Though he had outlined action steps, the real test lay ahead. How would he secure the funding, build interest, and engage a community that had long viewed the garage as just an ordinary repair shop? Jake clenched his fists, determined to push past the discomfort. He had taken the first step, and now momentum was a tangible companion in his journey. But with his enthusiasm tinged with apprehension, a thought lingered. What if the community sees him as unworthy of leading such a change? As he stepped onto the evening-lit street, Jake knew he had a choice to make. Could he harness this momentum into something lasting, or would the shadows of doubt creep back in to undermine his efforts? The answer was just beyond the horizon, waiting to unfold. The sun dipped lower as Jake retraced his steps toward the garage, his mind swirling with endless questions. Each one clawed at him, demanding answers he didn't have yet. How could he convince local businesses to invest in this vision? Who would care enough to help him create workshops for kids who might not even see a future in mechanics? He reached for his phone, thinking of contacting potential sponsors, but hesitated. The weight of doubt had returned, threatening to smother the resolve he had just kindled. Once inside the garage, the familiar scent of grease and metal greeted him, grounding him in reality. It was easy to get lost in the chaos of the work environment, but now it felt charged with significance. If he was to create something meaningful, he had to reshape not only the space but also the perception tied to it. He flicked on the overhead lights, illuminating the rows of tools that had long been confined to routine repairs. For the first time, they felt like instruments of a greater purpose. With a surge of determination, he grabbed a worn whiteboard and began scrawling ideas. "Target demographics," he wrote, followed by workshop topics and funding sources. As he brainstormed, memories of his own youth rushed back. The nights spent in a similar garage, dreaming while working on cars, wondering what life might have to offer. A spark of nostalgia mixed with purpose ignited in him. He knew now that his goal was not simply to teach mechanics, but to offer a lifeline to those who felt adrift. Yet as he jotted down ideas, a pang of fear whispered in the back of his mind. What if he failed? What if, in opening this door for the youths in the neighborhood, he exposed himself to ridicule or criticism? The garage wasn't a celebrated institution. It was a place that locals saw as a back-alley fix-it shop. Each moment spent with his whiteboard, every bold stroke of the marker, was a declaration against that perception. He realized he wasn't just contending with resources, he was challenging a narrative. Jake stepped back from the board, observing what he had created. A vision was forming, but it was fragile, teetering on the edge of possibility. He took a deep breath, the weight of expectation pressing against his chest. This wasn't merely about teaching skills. It was about fostering hope. Yet how could he encourage hope when he felt encumbered by doubt? As he mulled it over, the bell above the garage door jingled, startling him from contemplation. He turned to find Victor standing there, a confident presence with an air of authority, a stark contrast to the turmoil within Jake. "What's the meeting room look like?" Victor asked, scanning the regular sight of tools and half-finished projects. "Making plans," Jake replied, forcing a veneer of calmness as he gestured toward the whiteboard. "For kids, workshops on mechanics and life skills." Victor's eyebrows raised. "That's ambitious. Think you can pull it off?" "Maybe. I'm trying to figure out how." "And when it doesn't work out?" Victor pressed, concern shadowing his expression. "You know how fickle these ideas can be." Jake felt a rush of irritation, his defenses rising. What did Victor know about hope? What right did he have to question his resolve? But then a sliver of vulnerability peered out from under Jake's bravado. His heart raced as he felt the familiar spiral of self-doubt threaten to rise again. "Look, I need this to work. It has to matter," he declared, his voice steadier than he felt inside. Victor leaned against the doorframe, crossing his arms, his gaze penetrating. "You need to ask yourself if you're ready, not just for success, but for the criticism and feelings of unworthiness you're already scared of." It was a challenge, and the truth of it stung. Torn between wanting to prove he could succeed and fearing the potential for failure, Jake grappled with the notion that perhaps Victor was right. Could he really take the reins of such a program, fit into a role he was still unsure of? As Victor lingered, Jake felt the tightrope of his ambition stretching beneath him. He realized that clarity wouldn't come from others. It had to come from deep within himself. But the question loomed. Was he equipped to navigate the wild terrain of criticism and expectation that lay ahead? Before he could find an answer, Victor spoke. "The time had come to face your fears, Jake. You either step up now, or you risk lingering in the shadows of doubt forever." The weight of Victor's words settled like hot iron on his chest. For Jake, the stakes were higher than they seemed, and every second wasted could undermine everything he envisioned. The visceral struggle between ambition and vulnerability coiled tighter within him as fresh determination clashed with rising fear. As he stood in the garage, surrounded by the tools of potential, Jake felt the pulse of a new journey beginning to resonate, ready to uncover the truth about his own worthiness to lead. But with Victor's words ringing in his ears, he couldn't shake the question. Was he about to unleash a bold vision, or was he merely conjuring a dream destined to fade away? Jake stood in the garage, the familiar scent of oil and metal swirling around him, grounding his thoughts as he faced the horizon ahead. The tension of the past few weeks had simmered to a firm resolve, and today marked the apex of his journey toward transformation. He had taken the daunting step of drafting an action plan for the workshops he envisioned, finally merging aspiration with actionable goals. With intentions clear and pathways outlined, he felt a palpable shift in his mindset. No longer merely a mechanic on the brink of losing his family legacy, he was now a man fully committed to reclaiming and redefining his purpose. As the door swung open, his heart raced with anticipation. He was ready for this next chapter. Entering with an eager stride was Cody, his young son, who immediately sensed the electricity in the air. "Dad, ready for the big meeting today?" Cody asked, excitement lighting his eyes. "More than ready, buddy. Today is about more than just a meeting. It's about showing everyone what this garage really means." "It's about our future," Jake replied, squaring his shoulders. The duality of his thoughts was striking. This was not merely a fight for survival. It was a stand for his identity, for the legacy he hoped to inspire in Cody. With a newfound clarity, he had recognized that this venture was about igniting potential in both himself and the young people in the community. As Jake entered the meeting room, the faces turned toward him held a mix of interest and skepticism. He tuned into the pulse of the room and began to articulate his vision with confidence. Each word carried the weight of his struggles, Every point gained purpose from his perseverance. The garage is not just a place to fix cars. It's a destination for crafting futures, he declared. Through mentorship and skill-building workshops, we can empower young people to see value not just in the work they do, but in who they can become. It's about more than repairs. It's about connecting, learning, and reaching aspirations. With each thoughtful response to the questions that followed, Jake noted the shift in the atmosphere. He was no longer the underdog trying to justify the existence of his small garage. He was now a visionary, a leader ready to engage with stakeholders and the community. The skepticism from the developers began to wane, replaced by a quiet respect for his dedication and clarity. Victor, seated among them, interjected with a thoughtful inquiry. So, what's your plan for sustainability? How will you engage this community in the long run? By fostering relationships that extend beyond the workshop, Jake responded. We'll commit to gathering feedback and adapting our programs based on what the community truly needs. This is not just a project. It's an evolving ecosystem driven by participation. In a triumphant moment, as he detailed the actionable steps toward these initiatives, Jake could feel the tide turning. The others absorbed his enthusiasm, recognizing the potential rooted in collaboration. Condensed phrases like community empowerment and skill integration became themes threaded through his presentation. After what felt like an eternity, Victor finally spoke up, a weighty but supportive tone infusing his voice. You have a real vision, Jake. I'm willing to back you on this. Let's collaborate. Count me in for resources and connections. If we move forward smartly, I think this garage can become a cornerstone of the community. That spark of affirmation ignited a fire inside Jake, amplifying his confidence. It was pivotal. He was not just gaining recognition, but establishing alliances, proving that success lay in a collaborative spirit. And in that room of possibilities, Jake felt the shackles of doubt fall away. Days turned into weeks of tireless planning and enthusiastic outreach. Cody witnessed his father channeling vigor into community gatherings, brainstorming workshops with local businesses, and drawing in kids who had previously felt invisible in a world of opportunities. One evening, watching Cody stitch together a model car from wood scraps, Jake found himself deeply satisfied. Each moment spent with his son illuminated their shared legacy, a promise to persevere against any odds. Finally, at the inaugural workshop, a motley group of kids filled the garage, inspired and eager to learn. Their laughter echoed against the walls that had once felt heavy with the weight of uncertainty. Every face before him symbolized the future he fought relentlessly to protect. Jake stepped back, absorbing the vibrant energy around him. This was the success he yearned for, not just for his garage, but for the very essence of hope it had fostered around him. The weight on his shoulders had transformed into a badge of commitment, pride, and fulfillment. Jake had conquered the doubts that once threatened to define him. He had proven that he could not only uphold his father's legacy, but forge an identity that resonated with authenticity, resilience, and community spirit. He had achieved a new status, a man of purpose, a father of empowerment, a leader within his community. With a heart full of conviction, Jake picked up a wrench, handing it to Cody. This was their moment and their journey, a legacy in the making. Now it's your turn. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. True fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.